before I call it a night, I am going to be doing the season preview for the New England Revolution. So, last season, the New England Revolution finished with a record of 11, 12, and 11, which sounds like a relatively mediocre mark, but consider the first couple of months when they were under Brad Friedel, where they were considered one of, if not the worst team in the league. You know, the fact that once Bruce Arena comes into this team and started to bring that winning culture to New England, and albeit he did put a lot of draws when he was there, especially near the latter part of the season, it's still relatively amazing. The fact that this team that looked like they were hitting rock bottom in the first couple of months of the season can actually make it to the playoffs. And they finished with 45 points last season. They scored 50 goals last season, conceded 57, which is a pretty high mark in terms of goals conceded, and is one of the most goals conceded in the Eastern Conference. But a lot of that has to do with the first couple of months when, as I said, they were hot garbage under Brad Friedel, and their defense gradually improved once Bruce Arena took over this team, and they had a goal differential of -7. Now, last season summary, they finished 7 in the Eastern Conference. They got knocked out in the first round by Atlanta United and eliminated in the round of 16 in the US Open Cup. Now, in terms of players that they acquired this offseason, they done their business very early in the offseason, and that, if you don't include some of the moves that they made in the first couple of weeks of the offseason, they've been kind of relatively quiet throughout this offseason. But nevertheless, in the first couple of weeks, they did make some big move to, I guess they want to get this done so that, they don't have to kind of like worry about the rest of the season, and they kind of address some of their needs that they need in the offseason. And one of their needs is that they need another striker to go along with Gustavo Bo. And the other striker that they brought in is Adam Buxaw. They got him on a DP contract, so it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to do with New England, and whether or not if he's going to be pairing up with Gustavo Bo in that number 9 position, or will Buxaw maybe play kind of like in the wing area, or as kind of like a secondary striker that can drip down the field in that number 9 role. They also brought in Sep Sinovic, which is kind of weird to mention the fact that he's not with Sporting KC anymore. I mean, everybody thought that Sinovic was a guy that was going to be with Kansas City throughout his career, but this offseason, SKC decided to let him go, and New England basically picked him up, which I think that's a good, decent acquisition in terms of the defense, which is something that New England still needs to kind of address. They brought back Kellen Rowe after he left New England a couple of years ago and went to SKC and RSL, which unfortunately didn't quite work out, but they of course brought him back, and he's definitely a fan favorite of this team. They also got Alexander Butner, another piece to add in terms of defense, and Damien Riviere to round up the acquisition that they made in the offseason. Now, in terms of players that is no longer with this club and left this team in the offseason, Brian Wright, there shouldn't be a T right here. It's actually Brian Wright, Cody Cropper, Samba Kamara, Edgar Castillo, Zachary Hervin, Joe Anababa, Isaac Ankin, Justin Renix, Juan Aguilera, and Juan Fernando Caicedo are all players that is no longer with the New England Revolution, and all these players are either getting traded or had their option decline in the offseason. Now, in terms of goals scored for the Revs, I still think Gustavo Bo is their main goal scorer. I mean, I could say maybe Adam Buxaw could be another guy that would be the goal scorer of this team, and it's just amazing the fact that they were able to get him, because I heard he is a very decent goal scorer, and that I'm pretty sure he will definitely relieve some of the pressure off of Gustavo Bo, and that, Bo is still, I think he could still score 10 to 15 goals like when he went to New England, and that he was able to hit around that mark, but at least New England doesn't have to always rely on Gustavo Bo as the main goal scorer, and that maybe they can also rely on Adam Buxaw to kind of relieve in terms of some of that load that Gustavo Bo will carry in terms of the goal scoring department. Now, playmaker, it's got to be Carlos Hill. I mean, he is considered one of probably last season. I don't think a lot of people gave Carlos Hill a lot of recognition, and he also kind of proved me wrong in terms of the fact that, when he came to the league, and I remember last offseason, I said that, yes, Carlos Hill is going to New England, and I wasn't necessarily kind of thrilled of the fact that New England, of course, got him, because we saw what happened when he was with Aston Villa, and we saw what happened when he with many other team in Europe, and that he seems like he has really kind of lost a step, and that this was a guy that used to be one of the most talented player in Europe, and well, not one of the most talented, but one of the most promising kind of player when he was young, and then he kind of falled off a little bit, but ever since he come to New England, he has really rediscovered that form, and that he's another example of what happened when you have players that might not work out in Europe, but when they come to MLS, they immediately make some instant impacts, and that is the case with Carlos Hill, where I think he definitely could have won the newcomer of the year. I think he there was a couple of recognition that he could also be the newcomer of the year last season, and he also led the team last season in assists, so that's why he's got to be the playmaker of this team. Now, in terms of MVP, again, it's got to be Carlos Hill, because not only he can be a playmaker of this team, but he can also score goals with this team too. And in terms of surprise package, I'm actually going to go with Kellen Rowe and Diego Fagundes, and I actually made a late addition in terms of putting Diego Fagundes on this name when I actually did a sheet to basically write down all the information on this board. Yes, I actually do write all the information on a Google sheet, or it's not really called Google sheet, but more like a Google document. And I didn't include Diego Fagundes as part of the surprise package, and I only include Kellen Rowe. But at the same time, I could say Diego Fagundes could be a surprise package, because, in previous seasons, he's been proven that he could be a very dangerous threat to this team. And it's hard to believe that he's been with this team for a very long time. I remember I actually saw a Reddit post that talks about some of the most loyal players in MLS, which means that who has stayed with a player that have stayed with a single club for the longest, and Diego Fagundes is right up there in terms of a player that have stayed with the same club the longest time. And it's hard to believe he's only 24 years old, and he's been with New England for like 8 or 9 years now, and he still can be a very dangerous threat, and that's one of the reasons why I put him. I kind of made a late addition. I'm not quite sure is it kind of a surprise when we knew that Diego Fagundes could be a dangerous man, but I feel like with the addition that they have going on the attack during this offseason, a lot of people will forget that Diego Fagundes could be another dangerous weapon for this team. And also I put Kellen Rowe there because, he is a fan favorite. We know what he did last time when he was with New England, and that he was considered one of the best player on that attack for the Revolution, and I won't be surprised if he can do the same thing now that he is coming back to the Revs for his second stint. Now, what I like about this Revs team, well, the attack looks very decent, and like I said, when you look at this attack with the likes of Gustavo Bo, Carlos Hill, Kellen Rowe, Diego Fagundes, and even I'll even throw in names like Adam Buxaw and Christian Pineda on that attack, and you basically just have a very decent attack that can easily score 50+ goal. And the other thing that I also like about this attack is they have depth in terms of the attack. Kellen Rowe, I believe he's going to most likely not be a starter for this team, but he can definitely be a guy that they could use coming off the bench. And the same can go with Christian Pineda, where they can also use that weapon to basically bring off the bench and really make a spark on this team. So yeah, not only this attack is very decent, but I think this attack definitely have a lot of depth too. Now, the one big question that I do have with this team is the defense and the D mid, and that it is still lacking. And I know, as I said, they did brought in some defensive help with Seth Sinovic and Alexander Butner. Sinovic, we saw last season he was definitely not having a great season, and there was even at one point Peter Vermees actually bench him because of how bad he was. And you wonder, it's great that they of course got a veteran MLS fullback player in there, but you wonder is his leg started to kind of falling off a little bit, because keep in mind he is approaching his mid-30s, and usually when you are a player that is approaching mid-30s, especially fullbacks, this is when their career is going to start to fall off a cliff. And with Alexander Butner, we don't know exactly, could he bring some good defensive help on this team. And other than that, when you look at this defense, Andrew Farrell, he could be a decent center back alongside with Michael Mancian. Obviously, they lost Joel Anababa, who was one of their main starter in the back line last season. So, there's a lot of question about the fact that whether or not if this defense could be decent, and also they don't really have a lot of D mid on this team. I believe one Fernando Casado was their defensive mid last season, and now they don't have him anymore because he's now no longer with this club, and that they of course denied his option for this upcoming season. So yeah, as much as New England has a very good attack, the defense and the defensive mid situation is still a little bit murky, and because of that, I think we could be in for something like last season, where we know this team can score goals, but we also know that this team can concede goals. So, hopefully their attack should be just as good enough, and that defense that is kind of a little bit of a weak spot for them will at least be sustainable enough that they can still win games, even though the defense is very suspect. But we shall see how their season is gonna come. And as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. And if you're a New England fan, what do you think of your offseason acquisition? Who do you think is the main goal scorer, playmaker, MVP, and surprise package? And what do you like about this team, and what is one big question you have with this team? But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.